Many believe human trafficking is just a third world problem, but that's just not true. I've come to realize that it happens right in our own neighborhoods, but many don't know the signs of human trafficking or how to prevent it. The movie Sound of Freedom has helped open the eyes of many to this very large scale problem, but there's still so much education that is needed. So, today we are going to be talking about the signs of human trafficking and how to prevent human trafficking. Welcome back to another episode of Your Hope Filled Perspective, where it's always our goal to restore hope, renew minds, and empower listeners to live in their God given identity. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Bengtson, and I'm so glad that you are with us. But parents, this is a very sensitive subject, so I would caution you now that while this information is very important for you to be aware of, I would suggest that you take the time right now to ensure that there are no small ears listening to this conversation. Because today it's a weighty conversation, but a very necessary one. Today we're going to be talking about the signs of human trafficking and how to prevent it. To start off this episode, I want to remind you of a verse that comes out of Proverbs 31, verses 8 through 9, that says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy." To help with this conversation today, we're going to be talking with my guest, John. John, will you pronounce your last name for me?
Sure, it's DiGirolamo. Glad to be here. Thank you, Dr. Bengtson.
I'm so glad you're here. I didn't want to butcher it. But what you need to know about my guest, John, is that he's an author, he's a speaker, and a human trafficking advocate. He's written this book. It's called It's Not About the Sex, which features stories from an advocate, a law enforcement officer, survivor, and a brothel madam's tale of redemption. He wrote the book because he believes that human trafficking is one of the most underreported issues of our day. And that cuts across all economic, social, racial, and political boundaries. He focused on stories from rural and suburban America, seeking to shine a light on and create awareness of the evils of human trafficking. Welcome to the program, John.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
John, what led you to write this book? It's Not About the Sex. This is kind of a weighty issue. So, did you just wake up one morning and decide, oh, we're going to tackle one of the biggest underreported issues of our day? Or how did that come to be?
Sure. So I was writing my first book, which was about police officers and kind of the human side of policing. And I would ask the interview several different questions, and I would end with easy ones like, what would you do if you won the lottery? And I'm expecting I'd go to the lake and go fishing all day. But one of the officers just stopped dead cold and said I'd quit my job and hunt down human traffickers. And when he said that, I knew that that was going to be my next book. And I realized that I don't know that much about this issue. I've seen a movie or two or saw some headlines, but very surface level, type of situation. And so the other thing is when I thought about it more, I realized that it's one of the most evil things that someone can do to another human being. And I really wanted to kind of go into that subject and give survivors, give people who work, law enforcement, et cetera, a voice of what happens, what really happens that's hiding in plain sight.
I think most people would be surprised to hear some of the statistics that you have. Would you share those with our audience?
Sure. So, one of the things that Sound of Freedom doesn't tell you is that it happens here in this country, in the big cities, but it also happens in suburban America. It happens in small towns. And so all my stories are based on, those kinds of communities, the nice communities,
Mhm.
not downtown LA or on the border, which clearly that's an issue and that happens there. But I wanted to talk about middle America pretty much. And what most people don't realize is that about 57% of those exploited in human trafficking are minors. So we're talking a large majority of essentially children, and 5% or less are kidnapped. So, and that's a different dynamic than, say, what happens in foreign countries, which was featured in the movie Sound of Freedom.
Right.
And the reason why kidnapping is so low is because 60% of the ways that somebody gets exploited is through someone they know. It could be a family member, a neighbor, somebody online who they think is a real friend, but they have no idea who's really behind that profile. And can happen while you're still in high school. And those are shocking statistics that most people don't think about.
And that's why I think we need to have this conversation today. I saw the movie The Sound of Freedom. I thought it was very well done. I think it pointed
Yep.
light on the issue. But to be perfectly honest, I came out of there thinking, well, that's great. Now everybody thinks it's a third world problem, and it doesn't show us what are the signs that we in our culture need to be aware of, because I do know that it's prevalent here. I do know it happens under our noses. I've treated those who have survived, and so my disappointment with the movie was that I don't think it educated very well about what we can look for. What do we need to be aware of? How do we contribute to stopping this problem in everyday America? So I'm grateful for you to be on the program today, because I think that's where we need to head with this discussion, because it's happening next door. It's happening at the elementary school down at the corner. I mean, this is a big problem, and it's not just third world. Talk some about the misconceptions versus reality with respect to human trafficking.
Sure. So I think a couple of the other misconceptions is that it's always targeted at girls, and that's just not true. 40 to 45% are boys. And so that's that usually comes as a surprise. And and the fact that it's happening in small town rural America. So it's not the kid that's snatched off the street in the white van type of situation. And what's happened in the last decade is the online component of this. And today's teenager thinks that having 1,000 friends or followers is a goal rather than a problem. Because I can guarantee you, if you have 1,000 friends and followers, so one of those, at least one, is some kind of predator. And they may be after human trafficking, or they may be after your picture or something else. And that's kind of the big component of today's generation. They've grown up with the internet. That's all that they know. And that's so different than any other generation that we've had. And they view online friends as real friends. And I was talking to a police officer who said that the average suburban popular teenage girl can have 5,000 friends or followers.
And how many of
Yeah.
those are
And so
predators?
that, yeah, well, exactly. You know that, and there's different types of predators, right? Because what we're seeing is that a predator online wants one of three things. They either want to extort you for some kind of financial gain. That's usually targeted at boys. They want to meet for some kind of sexual encounter, or they want more pictures. Those two are generally targeted at females. And what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to either lure you in and then blackmail you and say, I have a video of you. You have to do this for me, that for me. And it goes down in a spiral. And unless that teen reaches out to a trusted adult, hopefully a parent, then they're going to really feel isolated. They're going to feel on their own. They're going to feel like, you know, they're really being manipulated, and that's exactly what these criminals will do. They have no moral compass, and they just want to make money off somebody, and they look at people as interchangeable, and that's just really heartbreaking for any kind of parent to hear, but it happens, and that's why sometimes it'll happen while the kid is still in high school.
You share in your book about a story of a gal who her mood changed, her academic performance changed, her friend group changed. She was having difficulty at home, parents weren't getting along, and she met up with an older individual who said he was younger and ended up
Yep.
doing things that were totally inappropriate. But, she was under this misconception that he just loved her. He thought she was the best. So let's talk through what are some of the signs of human trafficking, because these parents couldn't figure out what happened to their little girl who was previously happy and excelling at school. And through the tale that you share in the book, that was anything but the case. So talk a little bit about what are some of the signs that we can look for.
Sure. So uh, definitely some of the things that every parent needs to be aware of is look for initially any kind of behavior change. And that can mean all kinds of things, but it could mean that you need to ask questions about an underlying issue. Anytime your kid is going towards drugs or alcohol, that's definitely an issue. And again, and that can mean other things. But if you are intoxicated or the person is trying to get you hooked on drugs, by definition, that means that you're going to be more easily manipulated for sure. And so parents need to look at that. The other thing is any kind of sort of secret relationship, whether it's an online friend or somebody else, if they're keeping secrets, that's when you need to start asking questions. A couple other quick ones are any type of second cell phone, big red flag. That means that they're having communication through that kind of secret relationship, and any unexplained gifts. Because there's a grooming process that happens, and one of the ways that they do that is they'll give that person gifts. So all of a sudden, your daughter has new jewelry that you didn't buy that she can't explain where it came from. Again, it could be all kinds of issues, but that's where the parent needs to be aware and have those conversations, ask those questions. Those are some of the big red flags of someone who is in that grooming process.
Let's talk more in depth about how these predators operate online. When I was growing up, there was no online. And even when my kids were young,
Right.
that was not a big risk factor. And we didn't even allow our kids to have cell phones until they were teenagers. But once they did, I realized, okay, the world has really opened up big. And I just don't think like a sexual predator. That's so evil that I have a hard time conceptualizing how anybody can be that way. So talk to our parents to help them understand, how does this start? I mean, it blows my mind. So how is it that predators are operating online?
Sure. So there's two kinds of predators when it comes to human trafficking. One of them is called a Romeo pimp. And as the name implies, they're going to try to look at their victim as a relationship. And so that's part of that grooming process. That sometimes can take weeks or months. That's where these gifts come in place. And the victim thinks this person loves me, and that criminal is going to try to manipulate that person by saying things like, you can't trust your family. Only I have feelings for you. I'm going to take care of you. And you need to reject your family. They're not looking out for you. You can't trust law enforcement, those kinds of things. So they're going to try to really isolate that person from their family and friends and get them under their sort of psychological control, if you will. And the other type of criminal out there is called a gorilla pimp. And that is a different scenario where the person sort of initially starts, usually through violence and complete control right away. That's where typically that person is not going to be still living at home, going to school. They're going to be physically isolated. They may hurt them, beat them, threaten their family, etc. And they're going to show extreme violence towards anyone, especially in front of that victim. So that victim knows, hey, that could be me next time who gets beat up or gets their face cut or something like that. And then they're using a combination of physical and psychological controls. So those are kind of the two different avenues. Now, sometimes it could be the same person. It can go back and forth. Um, and once that person really is more in that situation, then they really try to break them down. And when you're talking about somebody who's 14, 15 years old, they're easily broken. They're not savvy in the world, especially because once you have them under physical control, then you don't allow them phones, you don't allow them internet access, you may control them through food, sleep deprivation, etc. Because that criminal really wants to break that person down, so they'll do exactly what they say, and really be under that criminal's control. And these are hardened criminals because generally they're involved in other things. They may sell illegal drugs, guns, etc. So they're not just doing trafficking. They're involved in everything. So these are really really bad guys.
How are these guys getting to our kids? I guess that's the missing link for me, is how are they even getting to our kids?
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of ways that could happen. Unfortunately, trafficking through family members is something that no one wants to talk about, but happens more frequently than we'd like to think. One of the stories that I had was, the grandfather trafficked the granddaughter, and familiar trafficking is something that happens. Unfortunately, a lot of times there's sexual abuse even prior to that, and they'll start that at kind of a young age. So you've got that category, obviously super vulnerable, very traumatic situation. And when it's a family member, they're more likely to do what they're told and kind of trust them. Then you've got what I would call the vulnerable population, and that's somebody who might be lost in the foster care system, maybe as a runaway, a homeless teen, something like that. If you're in that kind of situation, the predators see that vulnerability and they're going to swoop right in. And many times that category of person has been abused in some prior instance. And if you're going out on the streets as a homeless teen, within 48 hours, you're typically approached by some kind of trafficker who essentially befriends you. I'll give you a place to stay. I'll give you some food, etc. So you've got that I would call the vulnerable category. And then the third category is going to be the one that people are the most surprised about. That's where it happens online. They're going to go into a private chat room, private messaging, and they're going to try to befriend that person and essentially work on that manipulation. And it's still kind of through someone that they think they know, but profiles can go up and down. They can be fake profiles. But once they get their hooks in them, then it really spirals very fast. And then typically the 13, 14, 15-year-old kid just doesn't know what to do. They feel embarrassed. They may feel shame. They don't know who to talk to. And then they're just kind of looking at themselves as stuck. And once that happens, the predators will just use that to their advantage. So you kind of got these three categories that hopefully kind of explains how it can happen in different ways.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to digest. Friends, we're going to take a real
Yeah.
short commercial break. This is such an important topic, but you can see why it's weighty, and I suggested you don't have young ears listening. Today we're having a very important but very somber conversation about the signs of human trafficking and how do we prevent it. John, I before the break, you were talking about how these predators get to our kids. And the third category that you mentioned was through online. Would you speak to our parents who are listening about how is it that our teens circumvent the parental controls on the electronic devices? Because
Sure.
I think a lot of parents think they're doing a real good job, but this technology is new to us older people. So how is it that that's being circumvented? How can we keep our kids safe?
Sure. So today's teen is always one step ahead of their parents from a technological perspective, maybe two or three steps for sure. So they've grown up with it. Their phone is attached to their hip, so to speak. So parents need to realize that. And some of the ways that they may circumvent is through applications that could have secret folders, secret photos, etc. So, for example, there's a program that's a calculator program. It does real math. It'll help your kid do their homework. However, when you go to the App Store, underneath the calculator title, it says keep your secrets, hidden folders, etc. Snapchat has a folder called My Eyes Only. So you think that you're diligent, you're checking your kid's Snapchat story, they look appropriate, etc. But have you looked in the My Eyes Only folder? So that's something to think about. So I recommend that every listener go to their computer or their phone, go to YouTube and type in what to do if I have strict parents. And they will be blown away by all of the self-made videos by teenagers telling other teenagers how to get around their parents' rules. I did this, and the first one I saw was a young lady in her bedroom smoking a bong, giving the advanced version of her tips with strict parents. It had 974,000 views at the time. So when we were kids, if you wanted to be sneaky, you had to be creative or ask your friends. Now you just ask YouTube, Siri, Alexa, etc. And so you've got a lot of easy ways to do that. So the question is, well, what do I do as a parent? Well, the first thing you need to do is control what gets downloaded on your kid's phone. There are parental control apps that will make sure that you have to put in a special password if you want Snapchat downloaded or Instagram. And I would definitely limit it to just a few social media apps. Now, the problem is that those social media apps is where the predators hang out. They go to TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Kick, etc. And so you definitely can put on some kind of parental control that's kind of an overriding application. Companies like Bark or Canopy are very popular, but ultimately the parent has to be diligent. You've got to check what's going on in those applications, and especially the chat rooms, private messaging, because a lot of times an application will have a prompt, talk to this person in a private message, but it loads a new program. So it's not with the old program that you initially started with. And so parents have to be the parent and not the friend. They've got to be diligent, and they have to have the conversation with the kid that there are these predators out there. And even though your kid may not be looking for trouble, trouble is looking for them.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay, let's shift the conversation just a little bit and talk about what are some of the signs that someone is being trafficked.
Sure. So, definitely look for that sudden change in behavior. If they're dressing differently, if they appear to have different attitudes, especially about, sort of moral issues, sexual issues, those kinds of things. If you've had those talks with your kid about your biblical values regarding sexuality, what to do, what not to do, etc., in sort of a Christ-centered model, if all of a sudden they start rebelling against that, that could definitely mean they're being groomed by somebody. And it may be a human trafficking predator, but it could be a predator who's looking to get a picture, an explicit picture of them.
And it's my understanding that There are so many people out there who are looking for pictures of kids that they then go in and alter for pornography sites. So the child may not even be doing anything inappropriate, but they can take those pictures. So, I mean, I have plenty of friends who post photos of their kids and grandkids on social
Yep.
media with their names, and they don't know how those photos are being used.
Exactly. The software capabilities today, you can put a someone's uh, say head on another body, and all of a sudden it looks like that person has now posed in a provocative way or whatnot, and then they'll go back to that person and try to say, "I'm going to send this picture to all your friends, and you're going to be embarrassed," and they'll threaten them, etc. That's definitely one way to do it. The other big problem that a lot of parents don't realize is the whole aspect of teen sexting. That happens in middle school, and stats are out there that by the time someone graduates high school, 90% have sent or received some kind of picture. So you've got kids generating content on their own, and then if that gets into the hands of a predator, it's going to be pasted all over the internet, the dark web, with maybe some child pornography sites, etc. And so, that's a whole other issue where teens are generating content,
Yeah.
and a lot of the child pornography sites, it is self-generated content. A lot more than people think. It's like 70% compared to, say, an adult creating the content, abusing the child in that way. It's self-generated, which is really, really scary.
Very scary. Very. So
Yeah.
now, what can you tell the parents about what do we do if we're suspecting trafficking behavior? We don't know for sure, but God, you've opened our eyes. Now we realize, oh, maybe some of those behaviors and signs and symptoms that we've seen are actually something significant. What do we do if we suspect it?
Sure. So first, you definitely want to get control of the method that the contact is made. So if it's on a phone, for example, you want to make sure that you're controlling what's going on. You can definitely get resources that are, some national nonprofits like the National Center on Child Exploitation, or A21 is another nonprofit out there. There's also local nonprofits. And you could definitely have a conversation with law enforcement, because if it's a criminal who's targeting their kid, this may be the piece of the puzzle that law enforcement needs to go and track down this criminal. And so you definitely want to have that involvement with law enforcement, um, as well as some of these nonprofits. There's also a human trafficking hotline nationally, and there's several that are dedicated to certain states. And so that's a very quick way that somebody could make a phone call, and then they'll get the resources in their area that they need.
John, you've given us a lot of food for thought, and I would imagine you've scared some parents today, but we don't mean to scare you, but we do mean to educate you so that you can keep your eyes and ears open so that you can keep those kiddos that you love safe. So, John, that brings up the question, what can we as the average person in middle America do to help prevent trafficking?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I'll just say is a little bit of a parenting 101, which is, knowing where your kids are, what they're up to, who their friends are, who their friends' parents are. That's definitely, kind of the first step. Being aware of what's going on, looking for those warning signs, because it might not be your kid that's showing warning signs. It could be someone on their soccer team, and somebody who maybe seems really withdrawn all of a sudden. Something's going on, and it's good to get to the bottom of that. And I also like to give people kind of an old school tip, which is have your kid know 5 phone numbers by heart. So when I was a kid, I knew lots of people's phone numbers.
Yeah.
And then it became speed dial 1, 2, and 3. Now it's on your smartphone in your contact database. Nobody knows anybody's phone number anymore. So imagine if your kid is in real danger. Now, maybe their phone battery died and they need a phone number to call. But what if they're in real danger? They need to know 5 phone numbers of, mom, dad, grandma, trusted adult, whoever those people might be. That's definitely something that can be done. And you've just got to have, I think, that those conversations with the kid. It's not necessarily a fun conversation, and it's about predators. It's about what are their friends doing. Kids are so easily influenced by their friends, and really kind of limiting that time online. If the kid is spending 12 hours a day on their phone, maybe they're just wasting time on the internet, but maybe they've got these secret online friends, and who knows where they are. Those criminals could be in other countries. They could be next door. They could be posing as another 13-year-old, and yet they're, somebody who's 50 years old. And so you definitely have to be skeptical and be very involved. And, that's time consuming. It's a tough job. But who are the kids that are the most vulnerable, the unsupervised, those that are, maybe feeling bullied, maybe feeling, low self-esteem. Every teen goes through that. We've all gone through that. But the parent wants to be there so that those kinds of situations last a day, not month after month.
So, John, if a listener is listening in on our conversation today and they're resonating with it, either because they know someone who's been in that situation or because they're concerned about someone that they love, what hope-filled perspective would you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, no matter what the situation is, whether the kid has sent maybe an inappropriate photo or trafficking, there is hope. There is resources out there that they can utilize. They definitely need to, have that really solid relationship with God. Give God the burden. Make that an integral part of your life and your recovery, and you're more likely to, recover faster and have that relationship that's going to, hopefully last the rest of your life. Let him take the burden. A lot of times teens think whatever's happening to them is always drama. But there's ways to get through that. Maybe they've sent a picture or something like that, but it's not the end of the world. They could still have a life. There's so many sad stories about somebody who's made a mistake. They feel backed into a corner and they really spiral into some kind of depression or self-harm. No parent wants that. Have that conversation with the child before it gets to that situation, so they know they can come to you. Sometimes it's just opening up a conversation, and it can lead to telling them you love them, etc., and knowing that you're going to be on their team, by their side. You'll get to it through it together, and maybe the teen knows that deep down, but boy, they need to hear it.
I think the other thing that we did as parents was to let our kids know, look, if you ever find yourself in a situation that makes you feel uncomfortable, you can always text us or call us, and we will call you and say, we need you to come home, so that you have an excuse. It falls on us as parents. We will take the weight, but you have an excuse to escape. We will come get you, no questions asked. Fortunately, we didn't ever need to do that, but it allowed them a way of escape that didn't make them look bad. It made us as parents look bad to their peers. And we can take that. I don't care if I look bad to your friends if I'm keeping you safe.
Exactly. You can't go to that party. Mom's going to be all over that. And so now they've got a good excuse, because a lot of times that's where, bad things happen. It may not be trafficking, but other bad things, plenty of other bad things can happen when behavior gets out of control by people, especially, teenagers, not always known for making the best choices. So we try to minimize those mistakes.
Well, and sadly, sometimes it's the parents of the friends that we need to be most concerned about.
Yeah.
Yeah. John, thank you so
Yeah, know
much
the friends and know the friends.
for sure. Know the friends and know the parents. John, thank you so much for being on the program. Friends, I'm going to put all the information about John and his book in the show notes that you can find at drmichelleb.com. This is an interesting read. It's true stories that John tells from the perspective of a law enforcement officer, a survivor, a brothel madam, as well as an advocate. It's not a light read, but it's an eye-opening read. And so, this is something that we need to educate ourselves on to keep people safe. Friends, we put all that information about John in the show notes at drmichelleb.com. This is an episode that I really hope that you will share with your friends and family members, with other parents that are in your Bible study, that are in your church group, that are in your pickleball league, wherever it is that you associate, because we need to keep our kids safe. The one line from The Sound of Freedom that I just can't get out of my head, and that is that God's children are not for sale, but it's up to us to do what we can to keep them safe. This is not just happening in Colombia and Nicaragua and Haiti. It is happening down your street. Heavy episode.
Yeah, and the readers should know that at the end of the book, there's a what you can do section that goes over a lot of the things we talked about. There's also an audio version, and a lot of people have said that came out very well.
Awesome. John, thank you so much. Friends, I know this was a heavy episode, but I appreciate you being with us. Until we meet again next week, it's my hope that you have a hope-filled week.